My name is Hazel, and the night it all began was soaked in rain and betrayal. It was a Friday evening, the kind of night when the city feels like it's drowning. The sky opened without warning, heavy sheets of water battering the streets, bouncing off car roofs, flooding gutters in minutes. I clutched my coat tighter as Richard, my husband, pulled me along the sidewalk. He barely slowed for the puddles, his polished shoes splashing mud onto my legs, his grip more like a clamp than a hand. We had just left a dinner party with his colleagues. For 3 hours I had smiled, laughed at their stories, and answered their polite questions about my little hobbies, while Richard boasted about deals and investments. Every time I spoke, he cut me off. Every time I laughed too loudly, his hand squeezed my knee under the table like a warning. To everyone else, we looked like a perfect couple. Behind closed doors, the cracks were widening. When we reached the car, I hesitated before getting in. "Richard," I said quietly, "you didn't have to snap at me in front of them. I was only trying to join the conversation." His eyes flicked toward me, sharp even through the blur of raindrops on the windshield. "Join the conversation? Hazel, you embarrassed me. Do you think they came to hear your opinions about business? You don't belong in those rooms." The words stung, but I swallowed them down. I didn't want to fight in the middle of a storm. I slid into the passenger seat, rain dripping down my hair and onto the leather. He drove in silence, the wiper screeching back and forth, slicing through the water but not through the tension. When we pulled into the driveway, I reached for the handle. That's when his voice, low and venomous, cut through the patter of the rain. "No, don't get out yet." I froze. "What?" "You stay outside tonight," Richard said, his hand resting on the lock button. "You need to learn respect." The air left my lungs. "Richard, it's pouring. Please, I'll get sick." "Good," he muttered, a cruel smile tugging at his mouth. "Maybe sickness will remind you to keep your place." He unlocked the door but didn't wait for me to move. I stumbled out, rain instantly soaking through my dress, my shoes sinking into the wet grass. I tried to run for the porch, but he rolled the window down just enough for his last words to reach me. "Think about how pathetic you look. Maybe next time you'll remember your role." Then the car reversed out of the driveway, tires hissing against the water, and he was gone. I stood there, shaking, drenched, the storm pressing down like a punishment. My fingers fumbled with the key, slippery and numb. The porch light flickered, mocking me with its dim glow. When the key slipped from my hand and fell into the flooded step, I dropped to my knees, clawing for it. The cold gnawed at me, my breath short and ragged. My legs gave out before I found it. The world tilted sideways. My arms felt too heavy to lift. I collapsed against the concrete, the storm swallowing my last bit of strength. Headlights cut through the rain. Richard's car pulled back into the driveway. For a fleeting second, relief bloomed. He had come back for me. But when the door opened, I saw his face, hard and disinterested. He didn't rush. He didn't kneel. He just stood there, arms crossed, rain sliding off his umbrella. "Pathetic," he muttered, his voice sharp even through the storm. "Maybe this will finally teach you." Darkness closed over me. When I opened my eyes, it was to fluorescent lights and the steady beep of machines. My throat burned, my chest ached, and every muscle screamed. I tried to move, but tubes and wires anchored me to the bed. Panic clawed at my chest until a nurse appeared, pressing a hand gently on my shoulder. "You're safe," she whispered. Her expression, however, was anything but calm. "You're lucky someone found you when they did. Another hour out there and your body would have shut down." I croaked the question that burned in my mind. "Where's Richard?" The nurse's lips pressed into a thin line. She hesitated, then shook her head. "He didn't bring you in. A stranger did. He saw you collapsed outside your own home." The words gutted me. My husband hadn't saved me. He had left me to die in the storm. As I lay there, rain still dripping in my memory, one truth hardened in my chest. Richard wanted to teach me a lesson, but he had no idea that I was about to teach him one he'd never forget. The hospital kept me for 2 nights. Pneumonia threatened, but antibiotics and oxygen pulled me back. Through it all, Richard never came. No calls. No flowers. No presents. Not even a text. Only silence. On the 3rd morning, Elaine, my oldest friend, appeared with a bag of fresh clothes and worry etched across her face. "Hazel," she whispered, brushing damp strands of hair from my forehead, Do you want to tell me what really happened? I wanted to answer, but the words tangled in my throat. How do you explain that your husband left you in the rain like garbage? That he watched you collapse and didn't care? I forced a smile. It was an accident. I slipped. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't believe me. And deep down I knew silence would only protect Richard, not me. When I was discharged, I returned to a house that no longer felt like mine. The air was thick with the smell of Richard's cologne. A glass sat on the counter, lipstick smudged in a color I didn't wear. At first, I told myself it was nothing, a guest, a trick of the light. But then I noticed the detail that turned my stomach. 2 wine glasses in the sink. Both used. Both recent. I carried the evidence to the dishwasher, hands trembling. Before I could load them, the front door opened. Richard walked in, phone pressed to his ear. He stopped when he saw me, irritation flashing across his face. "You're home earlier than I expected," he said, voice flat. I stared at him, my chest burning. "I was in the hospital, Richard. I nearly died." He shrugged, slipping off his jacket. "And yet here you are. Alive. Maybe you'll think twice before acting out next time." I froze. "Acting out? You left me in the rain. You watched me collapse." His smirk widened. "Lesson learned, then." He poured himself a drink as if the subject bored him. Anger surged, but before I could speak, his phone buzzed again. He answered quickly, turning his back. I caught fragments of his words. "Yes, she's fine. No, she doesn't suspect. Tonight, then." My stomach dropped. He wasn't talking about work. He was talking about her, the woman who had been drinking wine in my kitchen. When he hung up, I forced my voice to stay calm. "Who was that?" "Business," he said smoothly. "Nothing you'd understand." But his mistake was small, almost invisible. A faint scent clung to his shirt, floral perfume. Not mine. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked the halls in silence, listening to every creak of the house. At one point I heard his office door close. I pressed my ear to it, my pulse racing. His voice, low but audible, drifted through the wood. "She'll break soon. She always does. She thinks she has power, but she's just a wallet. Nothing more." I staggered back, my breath stolen from my lungs. A wallet. That was how he saw me. Not a wife. Not a partner. Just a source of money. A prop for his ambitions. The betrayal was complete. It wasn't only the cruelty and the storm. It wasn't only the lipstick on the glass. It was this, his voice dripping with contempt, planning with someone else, dismissing me as if I were already erased. I went back to bed, staring at the ceiling until dawn. My body ached, but my mind burned hotter than fever. The man I had loved, defended, nearly died for. He had reduced me to nothing. And as the first light broke through the curtains, I whispered to myself, if he thinks I'm nothing, then he has no idea what I'm capable of. Downstairs, his phone buzzed again. This time, the message lit up on the screen he'd left unattended. 5 words that froze me solid. "Can't wait for tonight, love." The message on Richard's phone glared at me like fire. "Can't wait for tonight, love." The name above it was saved only as an initials. No surname. No photo. Just a letter. My fingers trembled as I placed the phone back exactly where he had left it. I couldn't let him know I'd seen it. Not yet. If I wanted the truth, I would have to gather it piece by piece. The next morning, Richard left early, claiming he had urgent business. His suit was pressed, his cologne thick, his tie a shade I had never picked for him. As soon as the door shut, I grabbed my notebook. If he thought I was just a wallet, then I would become an investigator too. I started in his office. The desk drawers were locked, but Richard was careless. He'd hidden the spare key behind a framed photo of us on vacation. I slid it in and opened the first drawer. Bank statements. Receipts. At first glance, nothing unusual. But as I flipped through, the pattern emerged. Large withdrawals, cash payments, expensive dinners, all on dates when he had supposedly been working late. Then I saw it. A receipt from a boutique downtown, dated the same night I was in the hospital. The purchase, lingerie. Not my size. Not my style. I took a photo of it with my phone and slid everything back in place. That afternoon I called Elaine. "I need your help," I whispered. "But you can't breathe a word of this to anyone." She didn't hesitate. Tell me where to meet you. We met in a cafe across town, a place Richard would never set foot in. I laid out the receipts, the lipstick-stained glass I had saved, the notes I'd scribbled down about his calls. Elaine's eyes widened. He's sloppy, she said. That's good. Sloppy men always trip over their own lies. But I shook my head. I need more than suspicion. If I confront him now, he'll twist it back on me. He always does. Elaine leaned closer. Then follow him. See where he goes. The thought terrified me, but it made sense. That evening, when Richard claimed he had another late meeting, I slipped out 10 minutes after he left. My heart pounded as I drove 2 cars behind him, headlights dimmed. The storm from earlier in the week had cleared, but the air still felt heavy, like the city itself was holding its breath. He pulled into a hotel downtown. Not the grand kind with chandeliers and valets, but discreet, modern, the type designed for affairs. I parked across the street, hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. Through the lobby window I saw him. Smiling. Relaxed. A man who had left his wife to collapse in the rain, now laughing with a woman whose arm slid into his. She was younger, dressed in the very shade of red lipstick I had found on the glass. I snapped photos with my phone, my breath shaking. Frame after frame captured his betrayal. Richard, hand on her back. Richard kissing her cheek. Richard, handing her a small gift bag. The weight of it nearly crushed me, but I forced myself to keep the camera steady. Proof. That was what I needed. Proof no one could deny. When he disappeared into the elevator with her, my hands finally dropped to my lap. Tears blurred my vision, but rage sharpened my focus. Back at home, I printed the photos, laid them beside the receipts, and slid them all into a folder. My evidence was growing, but it wasn't enough yet. Richard was powerful, convincing. If I wanted to shatter his mask, I needed to build a case so solid no one could save him from it. The next morning I found my opportunity. His phone buzzed on the counter while he showered. Another message from S. I copied the number down quickly, storing it under unknown. Elaine's brother worked in IT. That afternoon, I handed him the number and asked a favor. By evening, he had traced it to a woman named Sylvia Hart. Married. To a corporate investor Richard often courted. The betrayal deepened. He wasn't only cheating on me. He was gambling with business, money, and reputations far bigger than our marriage. I stared at Sylvia's photo on the screen, bile rising in my throat. She wasn't a stranger. I had seen her at dinners. She had smiled at me across tables, complimented my dress, pretended to be my friend. I shut my phone, pulse hammering. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. It was political. And that meant the fallout when I struck would be catastrophic. The folder on my desk was growing thicker. Receipts, photos, messages. Every page a piece of Richard's downfall. But I knew evidence alone wasn't enough. Richard was manipulative. He could smile through scandal, twist words until the truth bent in his favor. If I confronted him alone, he'd paint me as hysterical. I needed allies. Elaine was the first. She had already seen the receipts and the lipstick glass. But when I showed her the hotel photos, her jaw clenched. Hazel, this isn't just betrayal. This is humiliation. He left you in a storm to collapse, and now he's parading around with her like you don't exist. You can't let him win. I won't, I said. My voice surprised me. It wasn't weak anymore. It was steady, sharp. But I have to do this smart. He's powerful. He has connections. If I fall, he'll bury me. Elaine nodded. Then we make sure you don't fall. The second ally came by chance. Elaine's brother Ryan, who had traced Sylvia's number. He leaned across the cafe table where we met, lowering his voice. Hazel, Richard's phone records don't just connect him to Sylvia. There are money transfers. Large ones. Unmarked accounts. Offshore. I froze. Are you sure? Ryan slid a printout toward me. Positive. He's been funneling money out of your joint assets. Nearly $50,000 in the past 2 months. 50,000. My stomach turned cold. He hadn't only betrayed me emotionally. He was bleeding me dry financially. That night I sat at my desk long after midnight, combing through bank statements I had ignored for months. Buried among household expenses were transfers I hadn't approved, all under vague descriptions. Richard thought I wouldn't notice. He thought I was too weak, too trusting. But I wasn't that woman anymore. By dawn I had a plan. I called a lawyer. A woman named Margaret, recommended by Elaine. When I explained everything, Margaret's voice was calm but fierce. Hazel, you're sitting on gold. Receipts, photos, bank records, a mistress tied to his investors? That's not just grounds for divorce. That's leverage. If you play this right, you won't just walk away, you'll walk away with everything. The thought steadied me. For years, Richard had chipped away at my confidence, treating me as an accessory. But in Margaret's words, I heard possibility. Over the next week, I met with Margaret in secret. We built files, timelines, witness lists. Every time Richard left for his meetings, I was at Margaret's office, piecing together his lies. Elaine became my lookout, texting me updates if Richard's car appeared near home. Still, fear lingered. Richard wasn't stupid. If he sensed what I was doing, he'd strike first. And the way he had looked at me in that storm, arms crossed, watching me collapse, I knew he was capable of cruelty without remorse. One night, while gathering documents, I found something that made my blood run colder than the rain that had nearly killed me. A safe deposit slip. The date was recent. The amount, $250,000. Withdrawn. Hidden. I showed Margaret the slip the next morning. She leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen. That's your money too. If he's hiding it, he's not just cheating, he's committing fraud. Hazel, this is bigger than betrayal. This is criminal. The pieces were falling into place, but timing would be everything. If I struck too early, he'd wriggle free. If I waited too long, he could drain everything. Elaine squeezed my hand as we left Margaret's office. You have him cornered. Now you need the right moment to end it. I nodded, staring down at the folder in my hands. Richard had left me in the rain to teach me a lesson. Soon I would teach him what real consequences looked like. That evening, Richard came home earlier than expected. As I scrambled to hide the folder, he leaned against the doorway, watching me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. What are you working on, Hazel? He asked softly. Too softly. Richard's question. What are you working on, Hazel? Echoed in my ears long after he left the room. I had brushed it off with a weak smile, mumbling something about reorganizing receipts, but the way his eyes narrowed told me he didn't quite believe me. I needed to move faster. The folder with my evidence wasn't safe in the house anymore. That night, while Richard snored in the bedroom, I slipped quietly out, folder pressed against my chest, and drove to Elaine's place. She opened the door in her robe, eyes widening at the sight of my pale face. Keep this safe, I whispered, handing her the folder. If he finds it, everything's over. She didn't hesitate. It'll stay here. He'll never touch it. With the evidence secured, I turned my focus to building the plan. Margaret, my lawyer, was relentless. We met daily, sometimes in her office, sometimes in coffee shops across town. She guided me through every detail: bank accounts, property records, company shares. Hazel, she said one afternoon, flipping through her notes. Your husband thinks he holds all the cards. But he's made two mistakes. First, he left a trail. Second, he underestimated you. Her words steadied me. For years, Richard's voice had drowned out my own, convincing me I was smaller, weaker. Now, with Margaret's sharp tone in my ear, I felt myself sharpening too. The plan unfolded in layers. Step 1. Freeze the accounts Richard thought were his playground. Margaret drafted emergency motions, and within days, the bank placed temporary holds. Step 2. Gather allies beyond Elaine and Ryan. That meant investors. Men Richard lied to while sneaking away with Sylvia. If they saw the truth at the right moment, Richard's entire empire would collapse. But I needed timing, precision. I couldn't storm into a boardroom with accusations. I had to orchestrate it so the evidence struck when Richard least expected. The opportunity came from Richard himself. At dinner one night, he bragged about an upcoming investors' retreat at a luxury hotel. It'll be the deal of the year, he said, his glass raised. By the time we're back, everything will be set in motion. I smiled faintly, masking the storm inside me. That retreat would be his undoing. Elaine helped me practice the reveal. We rehearsed how I would walk in, how the evidence would be laid out, how silence would fall before the truth detonated. Ryan worked behind the scenes, securing backups of every file. He can deny words, Ryan said, But he can't deny numbers. These transfers? They'll bury him. Still fear crept in. Richard wasn't stupid. He was careful with his public mask. What if he sensed the trap? What if he turned it back on me, claiming I was hysterical, jealous, unstable? One night, doubt broke through and I whispered to Elaine, "What if I fail? What if he walks away untouched and I'm left with nothing?" Elaine's grip tightened on my shoulders. "Hazel, you already survived worse. He left you to die in the rain. You got back up. That's not weakness, it's strength. You can end this." Her words settled in my bones. Richard thought I was a wallet. Soon he would learn I was the storm. The final piece came unexpectedly. Ryan uncovered emails between Richard and Sylvia. Explicit, arrogant, reckless. In them, Richard bragged not just about their affair, but about how he used my money to fund their trips. "Hazel will never know," he had typed. "She's too busy playing the obedient wife." I printed those words and slid them into the folder. They would be the dagger. As the retreat approached, Margaret made the last move. "We'll serve him papers at the hotel," she said firmly. "He won't see it coming. He'll think it's just another night of winning over investors. Instead, it will be the night he loses everything." I nodded, my pulse steady. The date was circled on my calendar, bold and final. Richard had taught me about storms, about collapse, about betrayal. Now I was ready to teach him about revenge. On the night before the retreat, Richard kissed my cheek before bed, his voice smooth. "Tomorrow changes everything," he whispered. He had no idea how right he was. The morning of the retreat arrived with a deceptive calm. The sky was bright, the air crisp, and Richard hummed as he dressed in his tailored suit. He looked like the perfect husband preparing for an important business day. Only I knew the truth, that the walls he built were about to collapse. "Wish me luck," he said, straightening his tie in the mirror. I forced a smile. "Always." Inside, my chest pounded. Margaret and Elaine were already in position, the evidence folder copied twice and stored securely. Ryan had encrypted every file so Richard couldn't erase a trace. All I had to do was stay calm until the moment came. But fate has a way of testing even the best laid plans. When Richard left, I followed 30 minutes later. Arriving at the hotel where the retreat was held, investors' cars lined the entrance, expensive suits gliding past the doorman. I blended into the crowd, folder clutched under my arm, heart hammering. Margaret met me in the lobby. "Everything's ready," she whispered. "We serve the papers when he's at the height of his speech. The shock will silence the room." I nodded, my palms slick with sweat. We rode the elevator up, each floor taking me closer to the moment of impact. But when the doors opened to the conference hall, something was wrong. Richard wasn't at the podium. He wasn't schmoozing with investors. Instead, he stood off to the side, phone pressed tight to his ear, his face pale. Margaret stiffened. "He knows." My breath caught. "How?" As we stepped closer, fragments of his words reached me. "She's digging, freeze the accounts. Find out who helped her." Ice raced down my spine. Somehow, Richard had caught wind of our moves. Maybe it was a careless glance. Maybe he had checked one of the frozen accounts. Either way, he was on edge and that made him dangerous. Margaret leaned in. "We stick to the plan. He can suspect, but he doesn't have proof. Once the evidence hits this room, it's over." I nodded, trying to steady myself. But then another complication appeared. Sylvia. She entered through the side door. Her red dress impossible to miss, her smile sharp. She walked straight to Richard, her hand brushing his arm. Investors turned their heads, whispering. The mistress wasn't supposed to be here. Margaret cursed under her breath. This could backfire. If he spins it as business and she plays along, you'll look like the jealous wife. Fear gripped me, but I tightened my hold on the folder. Then we adapt. The speeches began. Investor after investor took the stage, presenting figures and projections. Richard sat in the front row, his smile brittle, Sylvia beside him like a shadow. My pulse raced with every passing second. Finally, Richard's name was called. He strode to the podium, confidence returning with each step. "Gentlemen, ladies," he began, voice smooth. "Tonight, I will show you not only numbers but vision." Margaret leaned toward me. "Now." I stood, legs trembling, and walked toward the stage. The room fell into a hush as I stepped into the spotlight. folder in hand. Richard froze mid-sentence, eyes widening. But before I could open the folder, Sylvia stood too. "Excuse me," she said sweetly to the crowd. "There seems to be a disruption." She turned toward me, smile cruel. "Hazel, maybe this isn't the place." Investors murmured. Richard's smirk returned. He thought he had regained control. For one dizzying moment, doubt clawed at me. If I revealed the evidence too soon, he could twist it. If I waited, Sylvia would undermine me. The plan was slipping. Margaret's voice, firm and steady, cut through my panic. "Hazel, trust the truth." I looked at Richard, then at Sylvia, and then at the folder in my hands. My chest rose with a deep breath. I stepped forward, placed the folder on the podium, and locked eyes with the investors. "If you want vision," I said, my voice ringing clear, "you'll want to see the truth about the man standing in front of you." The room went silent. Every eye turned toward me, the fragile wife standing with a folder in hand. Richard's smirk was steady, but I could see the twitch at the corner of his mouth. He thought I would fold, that I would tremble and sit down, that I would let him reclaim the spotlight. I opened the folder. The first page slid out smoothly, photographs from the hotel across town. Richard with Sylvia, his hand on her waist, his lips against her cheek. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I held the photos high, turning slowly so every investor could see. "This is where your money has been going," I said, my voice strong. "Not into the company, not into growth, but into lies." Richard's face drained of color. "Hazel, that's enough." I cut him off. "No, Richard. You left me in the rain to collapse to teach me a lesson. And while I was fighting for my life in a hospital bed, you were buying her lingerie." I tossed the receipt onto the podium. It landed with a slap, the ink glaring in the bright lights. Investors leaned forward, murmuring. Sylvia stiffened in her seat, her smile fading. I pulled out the next sheet. Bank transfers. Thousands upon thousands siphoned from our joint accounts. $250,000, I said, my tone measured. Moved into offshore accounts. Money that belongs to both of us. Money you hid, thinking I would never notice. One investor stood, jaw tight. "Is this true, Richard?" Richard sputtered. "Fabrications. She's hysterical." But I wasn't done. I pulled the final dagger. Printed emails, his words in black and white. I read them aloud. "Hazel will never know. She's too busy playing the obedient wife. She's just a wallet." Gasps turned into outrage. Faces hardened. Investors whispered furiously to one another. Sylvia's eyes went wide, her hand flying to her mouth. Richard lunged toward me, but Margaret stepped forward, blocking him with the divorce papers in hand. Her voice cut through the chaos. "You are officially served." The room erupted. Chairs scraped, voices rose, phones snapped photos of the scene. Richard's empire, carefully built on charm and deceit, was unraveling in front of him. He tried one last defense. "This is slander. She's lying." But an investor raised the printed receipts, shaking his head. "No, Richard. This is evidence." Sylvia stood abruptly, fury in her eyes. "You told me she was nothing," she hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You promised she wouldn't fight back." The crowd turned on him like wolves. I stepped back, my knees trembling but my voice steady. "You taught me lessons, Richard. But this is mine to you. Underestimating me was your final mistake." Richard's voice broke as he shouted across the room. His mask finally shattered. "Hazel, you'll regret this." But the investors were no longer looking at him. They were looking at me. The boardroom erupted into chaos. Investors leaned across the long table, some shouting, others demanding answers, their polished confidence unraveling in real time. The glossy hotel lighting suddenly felt like a spotlight, burning every secret into view. Richard's face was crimson, his jaw tight as he jabbed a finger in my direction. "She's lying. She's fabricating all of this because she wants sympathy." His voice cracked, betraying the calm mask he had worn for years. But the evidence lay spread across the table. Photos, receipts, emails. Pages of betrayal, undeniable and damning. One of the senior investors, a man named Harrington, adjusted his glasses and spoke sharply. "Richard, I have been misled. You assured us funds were secure. Yet here I see proof of embezzlement, deception, and misconduct." This is not only immoral. It is criminal. Sylvia's composure cracked too. She had tried to remain seated, lips pressed tight, but now she sprang up. Richard, you promised this wouldn't touch me. You told me she was weak, that she would stay quiet. Her words hit the room like another bomb. Heads turned. Phones recorded. Whispers rose into accusations. Richard spun toward her. Shut up, Sylvia. But it was too late. She had confirmed the affair, confirmed the fraud, confirmed everything. Investors began to stand, shaking their heads in disgust. One muttered, "Our company cannot be tied to this." Another, colder, "He's finished." I stood at the edge of the chaos, watching the empire Richard had built crumble. My body trembled, but not from fear. From release. From justice. Margaret raised her voice over the din, sliding the divorce papers across the podium. Richard, you have been served legally. You will answer for this in court. But tonight you answer to them. She gestured to the investors, her calm cutting through the storm. Richard lunged for the papers, crumpling them in his fist. This is a setup. She's trying to destroy me. I met his eyes, my voice steady. No, Richard. You destroyed yourself. All I did was shine the light. The room quieted for a moment, the weight of my words pressing down on every corner. Cameras clicked. Phones streamed. His shame was public now, impossible to bury. Richard's breathing turned ragged. He looked around desperately, searching for someone to defend him, to believe him. But even Sylvia had stepped back, folding her arms. Investors avoided his gaze. One of them, Harrington again, spoke coldly. Richard, your position is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from this building. The color drained from Richard's face. He staggered, mouth opening and closing without sound. For the first time he looked small. Security guards stepped forward. Richard tried to shove past them, but they held him firm. His voice cracked into a plea. Hazel, please. Don't do this. We can fix it. I stared at him, remembering the rain, the cold concrete, the moment he watched me collapse and called me pathetic. My answer was simple. No, Richard. We are beyond fixing. The guards dragged him toward the exit as investors turned away in disgust. Sylvia disappeared out a side door, her red dress vanishing like a stain wiped clean. The boardroom, once filled with tension, now buzzed with a different kind of energy, relief. Justice had landed. As Richard's voice echoed down the hall, fading into silence, Margaret leaned toward me and whispered, "This was only the beginning. Tomorrow the world will know everything." The morning after felt strangely quiet, as if the city itself had paused to watch what would happen next. I woke in Elaine's guest room, the sun filtering through pale curtains, my body heavy from exhaustion. For the first time in years, I slept without Richard's shadow hanging over me. But peace didn't last. My phone buzzed relentlessly, calls, messages, alerts. Richard's downfall had already made headlines. Prominent businessman exposed in scandal. Investors cut ties. Photos of me at the podium, folder in hand, filled every article. I hadn't just ended his reputation in a private room. I had ended it publicly, beyond repair. Elaine patted in with 2 mugs of coffee, her hair tied back. She set one down beside me and grinned. You're everywhere, Hazel. Social media can't stop talking about you. I scrolled through my phone. Strangers flooded my inbox with support, calling me brave, calling me an example. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from something else, vindication. For so long I had been invisible. Now the truth had a voice. But the other side of the storm was Messier. Richard tried to fight back. His lawyer called mine before noon, spitting threats about countersuits and defamation. Margaret handled it calmly, her tone cutting. He has no case. Every document she presented is real. If he pushes, will escalate to fraud charges. By evening, news broke that the authorities were investigating the offshore accounts. Richard hadn't just betrayed me. He had betrayed laws. His empire wasn't just crumbling. It was under investigation. Still, it wasn't just about him. It was about me reclaiming my place in a world he tried to erase me from. I walked through my own house that night, my footsteps echoing against polished floors. For years, this home had felt like his kingdom, his control. Now, with Richard gone, the silence was mine. Yet emotions tangled inside me. relief mixed with anger, victory with grief. He had stolen years of my life. Nights where I sat alone, wondering if his criticism was right. Days where I begged for affection that never came. Standing in the kitchen, I whispered to myself, "No more." Elaine joined me, leaning against the counter. "So what now?" I took a deep breath. Now I built something for me. No more hiding, no more silence. If Richard thought I was just a wallet, he'll learn I can be the architect of my own life. The following days brought new waves. Sylvia disappeared from the city, her name dragged through the press alongside Richard's. Investors issued public statements, distancing themselves from him. My lawyer called to confirm the divorce proceedings were moving quickly in my favor. The judge had seen the evidence. Richard wouldn't just lose his company, he'd lose his grip on me forever. And yet, I knew one more step remained. Public shame and legal battles weren't enough. I needed closure face to face. That night, Margaret called with news. "Hazel, Richard requested to meet. He's desperate. He wants to talk before the next hearing." Elaine bristled when I told her, "You don't owe him a single second more." I agreed. But deep down I wanted to look him in the eye one last time. Not to reconcile. To show him the woman he thought would never rise again. The next morning I walked into the cold glass building where Richard waited. His once confident posture bent, his eyes bloodshot. He looked up as I entered, and for the first time in our marriage I held the power. Richard sat across from me in the cold, sterile meeting room of his lawyer's office. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes even the walls seem to listen. His once perfect posture had collapsed into a slouch, his expensive suit wrinkled, his hair unkempt. For years he had been the man with the smirk, the charming mask, the voice of authority. Now he looked like a ghost, pale, desperate, and stripped of everything that once gave him power. He tried to break the silence first. His voice was hoarse. "Hazel, please. I made mistakes, but we can still fix something. I can make this right." I let the words hang in the air. They were the same kind of words he had used on me countless times before. Words that once twisted my heart into knots of hope and guilt. This time they carried no weight. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. "You watched me collapse in the rain, Richard. You called me pathetic. You told me I was nothing but a wallet. You used my money to fund your affair. And you lied to everyone who trusted you. You left me for dead, and now you want forgiveness?" His lips trembled. His eyes darted away, searching the room for something, anything that could shield him from the truth. But there was no shield left. For once, silence was his only answer. Margaret, calm as ever, opened the file in front of her. She slid the last set of divorce papers across the table. The sound of the thick folder scraping over polished wood cut through the room like a blade. "Sign," she said firmly. Richard's hand shook as he picked up the pen. He hesitated, staring at the papers as though the ink could somehow reverse the damage. His gaze flickered up to me, pleading. He was hoping for softness, for pity, for even a shred of the woman he used to control. But pity was gone. That version of me was gone. "Sign it, Richard," I said quietly. My voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "This is the last time you'll ever control anything in my life." His jaw clenched. With a final exhale, he scrawled his name across the page. The ink bled into the paper, final and unchangeable. He pushed the folder back toward Margaret with a hand that now looked smaller, weaker. That was it. The marriage that had once defined me, caged me, and nearly destroyed me was over. I stood, the chair scraping against the floor. My legs felt steady in a way they hadn't in years. As I turned to leave, Richard's voice cracked behind me. "Hazel, please. Without you, I have nothing." I paused at the door, my hand resting on the frame. Slowly, I turned my head back to look at him. His face hollow, his eyes wide with fear. "You're right, Richard," I said softly. "You have nothing. Because you chose to throw everything away." Then I walked out. When I stepped into the sunlight outside, it felt different. Stronger. Warmer. It bathed my skin in a way that reminded me I had survived the storm and now stood in clear skies. I wasn't the woman who had been left shivering on wet concrete. I wasn't the woman who believed she was worthless. I was the woman who had faced betrayal, gathered the truth, and turned it into power. The weeks that followed only proved how final his downfall was. Richard's name vanished from business circles. His investors pulled out completely, and the company dissolved under financial investigations. The offshore accounts he thought were hidden were frozen by authorities. Sylvia, once paraded on his arm, disappeared from the city. He had gambled everything and in the end he lost it all. As for me, I rebuilt. Elaine and Ryan helped me move out of the house that had once felt like his throne room. Margaret guided me through reclaiming my finances, ensuring Richard would never touch another cent of my money again. For the first time in years I was free, not just legally but emotionally. One evening while unpacking boxes in my new apartment, Elaine hugged me tightly. "You did it, Hazel. You didn't just survive. You won." She was right. Winning wasn't about crushing Richard. It was about reclaiming myself. About proving that betrayal doesn't define you, but how you rise from it does. I began investing in myself, small business classes, travel, speaking engagements. At first it was just therapy for me, but then something bigger began to form. Other women reached out, telling me my story gave them strength, that hearing the truth helped them face their own storms. I realized my voice wasn't just mine anymore, it was a lifeline. And so here I stand today telling you this story, because maybe you've been underestimated. Maybe you've been told you're worthless, that you're just something. Just a wife, just a wallet, just a background character in someone else's life. But you're not. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. Do not let betrayal break you. Let it forge you. Let it sharpen you. Let it remind you of the strength you didn't know you had. Richard thought I was a wallet. He thought I was nothing. But the truth is I was everything he could never be. Resilient, relentless, unbreakable. And if you're listening to this now, wondering if you have that same strength inside you, trust me, you do. Betrayal hurts. It cuts deep, but sometimes it gives us the chance to rebuild stronger than before. Don't let the people who underestimate you write your story. Take the pen back. Write it yourself. If Hazel's story resonated with you, if you believe in the strength of standing back up when life tries to knock you down, then subscribe, share this story, and stay with us for more. Because here, betrayal doesn't end in silence, it ends in justice.